Pick out your books and check what was the last topic we were discussing. Okay, focus nutrition of area. So, yeah. Nutrition. We were talking about the modes of nutrition. Under the concept of modes of nutrition, we have already discussed about holozoic mode, and then next is parasitic mode of nutrition, and third is saprotrophic mode of nutrition. Now, to talk about the concept of heterotrophic nutrition, heterotrophic mode of nutrition, what were the three types of heterotrophic mode? The three types of heterotrophic mode. What did we discuss here? If it is holozoic, what are the features of holozoic? We have finished this part, no? Yes. Yes or no? What are the features of holozoic? What are the two features of holozoic mode of nutrition? One is the organism should be able to break down the food inside the body. Organism should be capable of breaking down food inside the body. Second is the organism should be able to feed parts and pieces or whole food. These are the two features. What are some examples of holozoic we have learned? Human. Give me some other examples. Amoeba. Animals in the entire world is full of animals. Which one? You have to give examples. Don't write plants and animals. You have to give examples. Parasitic word, it will be customer. Parasitic, I'm not talking about. Holozoic, tell me. Holozoic, what examples we have studied? Human is an example of holozoic. Amoeba is an example of holozoic. We talk about the paramecium is an example of holozoic. We talk about a specific type of a bird like the pigeon is an example of holozoic. A small fish is an example of holozoic. Any type of an organism which can digest food on its own, take food inside the body, holozoic. Now, we talk about parasitic mode. What was the parasitic mode of nutrition we have studied? If it is parasitic mode, we have studied the other day that in case of parasitic mode, it is an association of two organisms. One host and the other parasite. Which organism is benefited? The parasite. Which organism is harmed? The host. I gave you the other day 2-3 examples of a host and a parasite relationship. What are some of the examples we discussed the other day? Human and leech. The poultry and the tapeworm, the cattle and the tapeworm, the human and the roundworm. So such type of an example we always understand that the parasite will always take a soluble nutrient from the host body. Parasite always will get attached to the host body. With this regard, if I understand that the parasite is attached to the outer surface of the body, we would name these parasites as ectoparasites, and if it is inside the body, then we will name it as endoparasites. Now that I talk about the leech, leech is an example of ectoparasite. Tapeworm is an example of endoparasite. But what is the common feature in them? Whether they are attached to the outer surface of the body or inside the body, the organism, meaning the parasite, the tapeworm or the leech, both are feeding on the body fluid of the host and directly absorbing the nutrients from the host body. Any of these two organisms, are they breaking down, digesting the food inside their body? No. So that is a parasite that we always understand. Either on the outer surface or on the inner surface, but always feeding on soluble food. Saprotrophic in that respect, if I talk about an example of rhizopas, I talk about an example of a mushroom, I talk about an example of a mold. In each of these organisms, what is common? In each of these organisms, all these organisms, they are always growing with on certain decomposing surface. They are always growing on certain decomposing surface. Decomposition of what? Decomposition of maybe the plant or animal bodies. Decomposition of plant or animal matter. So the plant or the animal matter, which also can be considered as organic matter, because all our tissues are made up of what? Biomolecules made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So that's why we say organic matter. So now that I talk about, then what is the concept of a saprotroph? What type of an organism is a saprotroph? Any organism which can feed on soluble nutrients of the dead and decaying organic matter. Decomposing surfaces are the best surfaces where we always come across fungal growth happening. Fungal growth happening. So now that we are talking about that, what would generally happen if I talk about the decomposition of a plant matter, animal matter? Bacteria is very well allowing the process of decomposition happen, and there we come across fungal growth. This fungus is also not able to digest food like the parasite. Then why not name it as a parasite? No, we cannot name it as a parasite because it is taking the soluble food only after the death of the organism when the process of decomposition has started. And this is taking the food from an organism which is still alive. What are some common examples? Some 2 or 3 points of differences you should remember. Let us write one question there. Write 2 differences between parasitic and saprotrophic mode of nutrition. Make a table. Write 2 differences between parasitic and saprotrophic mode of nutrition. 2 differences between parasitic and saprotrophic mode of nutrition. Make a table. Write down 2 points. Under parasitic, what happened? Why are you jumping from here to there? Where is your book? Can you make the table there? Parasitic and saprotrophic. Make a column, I said. Make a table. And then start writing the first point. Under parasitic, you write organisms. Under parasitic. Parasitic mode. Remember, these are the processes. Parasitic mode. Under that, you write organisms that feed on. Organisms that feed on soluble nutrients of dead and decaying. What am I saying? I'm saying about parasitic. Then change the head over there. Just change the head. I'm sorry. Saprotrophic organisms that depend on what I said. What is that sentence? Soluble nutrients of dead and decaying plant and animal matter. Dead and decaying plant and animal matter are known as parasites. Are known as saprotrophs. And the method saprotrophic, and the mode or method saprotrophic. Now we will write for parasites. Parasitic mode. We are differentiating between saprotrophic and parasitic. Now we write for parasitic. Write out Organisms that feed on soluble nutrients. Organisms that feed on soluble nutrients of the live host body. Live host body. Of live. Instead of alive, we are writing living. Or the living host body also you write. Of the living host body are known as parasites. Living host body are known as parasites. And the mode is known as parasitic. Mode is known as parasitic. So this is about the mode and what are these organisms called. Number two. For parasitic includes organisms like tapeworm. Parasitic include organisms like tapeworm, roundworm, leech, ticks, 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 etc. Ticks, etc., which do not have well-developed systems. Saprotrophs. Under that you write saprophytic. Under that method, this group includes fungi. Saprophytic, saprotrophic. Write one or two examples from that list there. This group includes organisms such as mushroom, mold, etc., which are developed till tissue system. They don't have any systems, only some tissues developed till the tissue level. Don't use that word system, you get confused. Developed till tissue level, that is enough. Yes. Second point. For the second point you write, under parasitic, this group includes organisms such as flatworm, roundworm, leech, etc., which do not have well-developed systems in their body. Other side, saprotrophic includes organisms like rhizopus, mold, which have few tissues in their body, which don't even have systems, which have few tissues in their body. Vultures are basically scavengers. No, they don't come under the concept of saprophytic, because if you talk about saprophytic and scavengers, how they are different is, scavengers can feed on large big animal forms also. The hawk and the kite that we are talking about, the eagle that we are talking about, of course it is not feeding on the dead animal, and on top of that, at times if it is feeding also, it is feeding on large group of animals.
So they can eat dead and alive.
They can eat dead and live both. Majorly, they feed on large group of animal forms. For saprophytic, we are talking about completely dead and decomposing. And now that I talk about parasitic, we are talking about small group of organisms feeding on majorly the smaller mammals, larger mammals sometimes. Now this is about the heterotrophic mode. The heterotrophic mode, what did we come across? Three types of heterotrophic mode of nutrition. We now go back to the concept of autotrophic mode again. We now go back to the concept of autotrophic mode again. For autotrophic, we had majorly studied about the definition and the types. What were the two types of autotrophic mode? Photoautotrophic and chemoautotrophic. If we just understand the basic difference between these two types, if it is a plant, a green plant, we say that it is photoautotrophic because it is absolutely dependent on light for the process of making food. But if it is a soil bacteria, we would say this is also capable of making food, but it is chemoautotrophic because it does not require light, it only requires some enzymes in its body and can utilize all the surrounding substances to make some organic food. We now again talk about the basic concept of autotrophic nutrition. Now, to understand autotrophic nutrition, now we are talking about photosynthesis. That's a very important part of this chapter. We are going to talk about photosynthesis. First of all, we have to remember what is the overall chemical equation and the definition. Then we go ahead. When we are talking about photosynthesis, what is the site of photosynthesis? Where does it happen? We have to start with the basic chemical equation. What is the chemical equation? Molecules of carbon dioxide. How many? 6. 12 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. In the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll gives 1 molecule of glucose. Here we are talking about organic food in the form of glucose. And what are the other substances released? Byproducts released, oxygen and water. This is the overall chemical equation. Now, if you have to write down the definition based on this, what are we supposed to write? The process in which green plants can utilize oxygen and carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to produce organic food in the form of glucose. That is what is known as photosynthesis. What is the definition of photosynthesis? We will write first. What is the definition of photosynthesis? The process in which green plants, right? What is definition? For 1 mark, the definition that you are asked is the process in which green plants utilize. The process in which green plants utilize. Utilize what? Carbon dioxide and water. Process by which green plants utilize carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. The process by which green plants utilize carbon dioxide and water in presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to produce organic food in the form of glucose. Organic food in the form of glucose. To produce
carbon dioxide and water
in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. So see the equation. I have written down this equation there. All of you will write down the equation. What is the equation? Process by which green plants can utilize carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to produce organic food in the form of glucose. This is clear. Is the definition tallying with what we have written as the equation of photosynthesis? Remember, and that's how you should always write down the definition. All the 3 parts should be there in your definition. What does the process of photosynthesis include? What does it produce? Now, as we are talking about the process of photosynthesis, we understand what would be the substances required and what would be the substances produced. Let us come across one after the other. We are talking about the definition of photosynthesis. What are some of the substances required for this process? So we go one by one. What are we going to name these substances as? We are going to name these substances as substances necessary for the process, raw materials necessary for the process. Raw materials. What are the name the raw materials necessary for the process of photosynthesis? What do you write? Carbon dioxide and water. I take the first one, carbon dioxide. How would the carbon dioxide enter the plant? Now, if I talk about the plant cells, a particular plant, and then this particular plant has got cells, and we are now talking about actually the leaf part, the aerial part of the plant. This part of the plant is the major site where photosynthesis is happening. So, which is that particular component which is constantly entering? It is the carbon dioxide. But these leaves of the plant, when we try understanding in a section, we come across that these leaves have got certain layers of cells, and there are names to these cells. There are specific properties to these cells which allow the process of photosynthesis happening. Here you will remember names of certain cells. As I draw, what am I drawing? I am drawing the layers of leaves, the layers of cells that the leaf possesses. Is the number of layers same in all leaves? No, it will differ. It will differ. The number of layers of cells will differ. Now, if I talk about let us learn one by one. Here I am talking about a single leaf. Maybe now I am talking about a single leaf here, and this is the section. I talk about only a small part. This is how it looks. You have a similar diagram. How many of you are having the textbook? Just see if you have a similar diagram like this. So showing the layers of cells of a leaf. Showing the layers of cells. Can you see that diagram in your book? The names of these layers you should be well acquainted with. Now let us name them. What is the name of the uppermost layer? This is known as the upper epidermis. This is known as upper epidermis. What about the second? This particular layer, you may just mark them. It's not mentioned in that diagram. You may just mention them. These group of cells are known as the mesophyll cells. The layers of cells just below the epidermis, they are known as mesophyll cells. We'll learn what is so special about this mesophyll cells. These are also mesophyll cells. Next is we are talking about this as the lower epidermis. Next is the lower epidermis. Then after the lower epidermis, we are still to mention about some more layers. This is the waxy coat, the waxy cuticle. It is known as the cuticle. So if we have to understand it is the waxy coat. If I talk about a difference between certain leaves like the mango, all of you have observed such type of a leaf. I talk about the mango and the mint. Is there any difference on the upper surface? Texture is there. And on top of that, the mango leaves are waxy. No? Shiny, no, it is the upper surface of the leaf is shiny. In comparison, if I talk about the mint leaves, it is not shiny, it is a bit coarse, rough, matte, it is matte looking. So when we are talking about the waxy coat, yes, majority of the thick leaves, they have got a waxy coat on the upper surface. And the waxy coat also plays an important role. What it prevents? Excessive loss of water it prevents. Excessive loss of water does not allow. The thicker the layer of the wax or the waxy coat, cuticle, what is the name of the layer? Cuticle. So cuticle is not a cell, it is just a layer of wax produced by the cells itself. This cells itself. This prevents evaporation. Now that is another concept. I am trying to understand that where is the process of photosynthesis happening? Obviously the leaves. Where else? Where is the process of photosynthesis happening? In the leaves, in the green young stem, young green stem. Will the process of photosynthesis happen in the young green stem? Very much. The process of photosynthesis very much happens in the young green stem because, okay, I will tell you about the property one. Number one, mention some site of photosynthesis. Where are the sites of the plant where process of photosynthesis happens? Photosynthesis happens in all the leaves definitely. Photosynthesis happens in the young green stem. Photosynthesis also takes place in some specialized group of cells. What are these specialized group of cells? These specialized group of cells are known as the guard cells, and these guard cells are a part of the stomata that we know. So now, what is common in all these cells? Number one, I am talking about mesophyll. Number two, I am talking about the guard cells. And number three, I am talking about the young green stem also. What is common? Each of these group of cells, they have got large number of a particular type of a cell organelle. Which is that organelle? Related to chlorophyll, chloroplast. So which is that organelle we are trying to understand? Which is majorly responsible for the process of photosynthesis, which is there in the guard cell also, which is there in the cells of the young green stem also, and which is majorly there in the mesophyll cell is the chloroplast. So in that section of the leaf, you should know all the labelings. You get that question in your paper, mark, label the parts and various questions on that. So what are the parts? The uppermost layer epidermis, the layer below mesophyll cells, the lower epidermis, and what is the bean-shaped structural arrangement of the cells? Guard cells and a pair of guard cells for stomata. So reference with that stomata, now I come back to this. Carbon dioxide, now that I understand, is it very much necessary for the process of photosynthesis?
Yes.
Very much. If the plant cells, if the leaf cells does not get adequate amount of carbon dioxide, no photosynthesis. So how would the plant get this carbon dioxide? The plant would get this carbon dioxide by the way of stomata. The plant would get this carbon dioxide by the way of this stomata. From where is the carbon dioxide obtained? The carbon dioxide is obtained from the atmosphere. What is the process involved? The process involved is diffusion. So how is the plant cell? How are these hundreds and hundreds of the plant cells obtaining the carbon dioxide? What process is involved? The process involved is diffusion. What are the special structures which allow the plant cells to get an adequate supply of carbon dioxide? Stomata. And one more feature about the stomata is majorly present where? On the lower surface on the under surface of the leaf majorly. Did you ever come across this anyway? Did you ever read this concept that whenever we are talking about the stomata, are the stomata evenly distributed on the upper and the lower surface? No. In majority of the dicot plants, we always understand stomata on the lower surface, numerous. Upper surface, very few. They will be there, but very few. So remember these features about carbon dioxide that I am talking about. How does the plant get it? From where does the plant get? And what structures involved? What is this again? Let's talk about water. I am talking about raw materials. Talk about water. To talk about water, similarly, are there any specialized part of the plant which enables the intake of the water?
Yes.
What are we going to talk about them as? We are talking about specialized cells. Which are those cells known as the root cells, or say more specifically, the root hair cells. The root hair cells are the specialized group of cells directly in contact with the water. So here I am talking about that these root hair cells are in direct contact with the water, and they have got a large number of special properties because of which the water constantly enters. I am not talking about xylem tissues right now. Name the structures. What structures? What are those special cells which enable the water intake so that the process can start, so that the process can run? Your answer should be root layer cells. Then, what is the process I should understand?
Osmosis.
Process is osmosis. Which process enables the intake of water? The process that helps in the intake of water is osmosis. From where is the water obtained? The water is obtained from the soil. Talking about the raw materials, how does the cell get the carbon dioxide? How does the cell get the water? Now, sunlight we are not talking about as such as a parameter because it's always present. Of course, as we have to talk about sunlight, there is a specific intensity of sunlight necessary for the process to start. For example, now, if I talk about something at 6:30, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, is this intensity of light? Now, sunlight is there now also. Sunlight will be there till 7 o'clock also. After 7 o'clock, it starts becoming actually dark. But can I say that the sunlight intensity now, will it help the process to start? No, it will not. But can certain reactions keep on happening? Yes, that will happen. So, of course, we understand that there is a specific intensity of sunlight necessary to start the process. We talk about chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a major requisite for the process. Chlorophyll is what? How do we define chlorophyll? We have already studied about this. Green pigment present in something better now. Green pigment produced by chloroplast. Function?
Photosynthesis.
Trap solar energy. Now let us write down this definition as we start. What is chlorophyll? Define. What is chlorophyll? Differences between chlorophyll and chloroplast. You should know this very nicely. When we are talking about the concept of chloroplast and chlorophyll, let us try understanding. First of all, write down the definition of chlorophyll. What is chlorophyll? Write down. It is a green color. It is a green colored photosynthetic. These definitions that we discussed, please write it nicely so that later when we solve questions from the book and the papers, you know these answers already. What is chlorophyll? It is a green color photosynthetic pigment. Green colored photosynthetic pigment produced by the chloroplast. Green colored photosynthetic pigment produced by chloroplast, which helps in trapping the solar energy, which helps in trapping the solar energy, which helps in trapping the solar energy. Okay. Now, this is which organelle I'm drawing here? The chloroplast. This is chloroplast. Is this chloroplast present in both the plants and the animal cell? No. It is present only in the plant cells. The chloroplast, a type of a plastid that we understand. Now, the section of the chloroplast, not much you should understand, but here I'm just trying to show you, since we are talking about chlorophyll, something that you definitely have to remember now is a rough structure of the chloroplast, talking about certain terms like the thylakoid, talking about certain terms like the thylakoid, talking about terms like the bundle of thylakoid known as the grana. I will define all these, and the matrix known as stroma. Now let me tell you about this. This much you have to remember. What am I talking about? This is the section of the cell organelle. Which cell organelle? Chloroplast. The section of the chloroplast, the structure is quite complex, but here, as for the need of our topic, we only try to understand that the entire chloroplast is cut into section to see. The entire chloroplast has some stack-like structures like this, as if it is made up of some 10 to 12 plate-like structures. As if it is made up of 10 to 12 disc-like structures. Each of this plate or each of this disc, what is it known as? Thylakoid. What is so important about thylakoid to understand? It is the site where chlorophyll, it is the site where chlorophyll is synthesized and stored. It is the site where chlorophyll is synthesized and stored. So that is why we are trying to understand about the thylakoid. What is so special about the thylakoid? Because it is a disc-like structure, a plate-like structure, where this particular pigment, the green color pigment, is constantly synthesized, produced and stored. But they are never present as single plates, but they are always present in stacks. Then how can we define this word granum? Stacks of thylakoid. Very good. So we are talking about what is it? Granum is what? What is granum? Stacks of thylakoid. Granum is a single word, and you will come across words talking about grana. Is it different? Granum is singular, and this is plural that I'm talking about. Nothing different. When two stacks I'm talking about, three stacks I'm talking about grana. One stack I'm talking about granum. One plate I'm talking about thylakoid. Matrix-like substance, this is a cell organelle. The chloroplast, the mitochondria, remember mitochondria? The chloroplast, mitochondria, all have got cytoplasm inside, matrix inside. So what is that matrix part known as? Straw. What is that matrix part known as? Straw. Clear, know these words? What am I speaking about?
What are those joining lines between
These are called fret. It's also have got a name, but since it is not necessary right now for your topics, I'm not naming them, labeling them. These are called the fret. Now, when we are talking about the basic structure of chloroplast, why we have to remember these two words, you will have to remember for the next part of the chapter that we are going to study. What is known as grana? Which part is grana? Which part is stroma? Okay, we are a little bit aware about this part. What is chlorophyll and what is chloroplast? I give you a question. What is the difference between chloroplast and chlorophyll? What will you write? First point. Chloroplast and chlorophyll. One difference. Chlorosynthetic क्या होता है? Did you understand what I am telling you? Chloroplast क्या था? एक organelle है. Chloroplast is an organelle. This organelle has this plate-like structures. What is the name of this plate-like structures? I told you, thylakoid. And the function of thylakoid is producing the pigment. Which pigment? Chlorophyll. Now, if you are asked questions, differentiate between chlorophyll and chloroplast. So, what should you write? Chlorophyll is the chloroplast, and chloroplast is the cell organelle. Chloroplast is the cell organelle present in plant cells. Function of chloroplast. Function of chloroplast. Producing the green pigment chlorophyll. Very good. Then what is the function of chlorophyll? Trapping of solar energy. I have समझ में two differences to write down that remains as a homework. Homework नहीं करोगे तो बाहर बैठना पड़ेगा 15 minutes, do the work and come back. First question. Two differences between chlorophyll and chloroplast. That you will take it as a homework. Just write down the question and then we proceed. Two differences between chlorophyll and chloroplast. Write as a homework. Put a note. Two differences between chlorophyll and chloroplast. Now, let us continue. Now,
also
what?
the thylakoid.
Huh?
Just the thylakoid.
What?
I read.
I'm not eraser. Okay, fine. I'm not eraser. Now, when we are talking about this till here clear, anybody has a doubt till here? I was talking about the raw materials of the process. I was talking about chlorophyll, chloroplast, the major section of a chloroplast. What are some of the parts that you should remember? Now I talk about the other side of the equation. Now I'm talking about the products. What are the, now from this particular equation comes for 1 mark in your paper. Comes for 1 mark in your paper. You are supposed, you already know how to write down a chemical equation. Can you write in 2 lines? Chemical equation 2 lines में लिख सकते हैं? हाँ कि ना? हाँ. Then why do you all write? Don't write. Chemical equation, it is a chemical equation to be written in 1 sentence, 1 line. Then only you get that full 1 mark. All these components to be written. Most of you start writing, I don't know what type of reference books you go through, and ultimately you start discovering yourself. You start writing here 6H2O. Never write that. That is wrong. That equation is wrong. You cannot write 6H2O here. You always have to write 12H2O because unless and until you write 12, you cannot write 6 there. And water release is a very, very important byproduct of photosynthesis. We cannot think of photosynthesis without water release. Yes.
Ma'am, while I was studying chemistry, so that S still
Your uncle is always there, no? Esther.
So I was going through the chapter and I found this photosynthesis equation there.
6H2O was there.
Yeah, 6H2O, and on the right hand side the product no 6H2O.
Esther, I'll tell you the book has got hundreds of mistakes. Go ahead with that book, not a problem, but you will not write this. 12H2O invariably. You have to write 12H2O because if I write here 6, I cannot put that water there. Photosynthesis process never happens without the release of water. तो यहाँ पे अगर मैंने 6 लिखा तो वहाँ पे water release में दिखा ही नहीं सकती, वो possible ही नहीं है. So remember that. So in your book, in the textbook, what is the equation given? 12 or 6? 12. In your book, it is 12 given. Just check, and that is the standard equation that we always write. Even in the higher standards, if you study biology, this is the correct equation that you should write. Products. Let us now start talking about this. Glucose. What is the first product? What is the main product produced by the process of photosynthesis? What is your answer? Main product, primary product, glucose. Name the byproducts. Byproduct, meaning additional product. Name the byproducts. Only this I will write. Now don't write this one. Name the products. All 3 to write. Name the primary product, only glucose. Name the byproduct, only oxygen, water. Am I clear? Now, glucose, what happens to this glucose molecule? By the process of photosynthesis, the plant cells are producing, which cells? This group of cells are producing glucose. But this glucose immediately gets transported to or converted to one form first. And what is that form? Sucrose. The glucose is formed in the cells, but it is a very short phase. Immediately the glucose converts to something big complex. What is this form called? Sucrose. Sucrose. Now this sucrose, a part of the sucrose will get dissolved in the phloem cells and start distributing in different part of the plants, and this process is known as translocation. What am I saying? What happens to this glucose? The glucose which is produced in the plant cells as a primary product immediately gets converted to sucrose, and a part of the sucrose will get dissolved in the phloem cells and start the process of distributing all throughout the plant in all directions. So what is this particular process known as? Translocation. What is translocation? The distribution of food in the soluble form by the phloem cells. Distribution of food in the soluble form by the phloem cells. Correct? But is that all? No, this sucrose, some surplus form of food. The surplus food. Surplus meaning addition. Exactly like when we consume food, we don't consume food exactly measured. So the plant cells are also not producing food exactly measured. They produce food much more in excess. So what happens to that surplus food? This surplus food will get converted to a more complex form known as starch. The surplus food gets converted to a more complex form starch, and this will now start getting deposited in the leaves, in the seed, in the flower, etc., etc., in various different parts of the plant. It starts even in the stem. Yes.
And can you repeat the meaning of translocation?
Translocation, I said, this is the process of transport of soluble food. What is translocation? Process of transport of soluble food. Process of transport of soluble food. In what form? Sucrose, to remember, soluble food by the phloem cells. By the phloem cells in all directions. So that is what you are supposed to remember. So you get a question for what is the fate of glucose? For 2 marks. What is the fate of glucose during the process of photosynthesis? You will have to mention this also, and you will have to mention this also. The glucose gets converted to sucrose, half of it in the form of starch stored and half of it distributed. Is this clear? So what happens to glucose? Then sucrose and starch. What are their relations? Anybody has a doubt here? Understanding? The last part that we have to talk about is oxygen. What happens to the oxygen? Say suppose now I come back to this diagram again and I try understanding that these plant cells which are undergoing the process of photosynthesis releases oxygen. Now that they are releasing oxygen, what will be the fate of this oxygen? Oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Oxygen is a byproduct. Oxygen is released out. Which structures will be involved in the release of oxygen? Same, stomata. What process will be involved in the release of oxygen? Diffusion. Diffusion. But if I talk about this oxygen, is it that all the oxygen is released into the atmosphere? Not all. A small portion the plant cells will keep for itself, and the major portion of the oxygen will be given to the atmosphere. The oxygen that is released by the plant cells, a major fraction goes to the atmosphere, released into the atmosphere by a process known as diffusion. But a small fraction the plant could keep for itself also. Why? Because this oxygen will be used for respiration. Basically, you understand respiration as of now. What you have studied as respiration is taking in of oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. But now, furthermore, you are going to study that respiration is not merely taking in of oxygen, but the breaking down of food to release energy. So, very good. We are saying that a major part of the oxygen goes into the atmosphere, and that's the reason we are able to survive. We are able to take this oxygen, our cells can break the food and we get energy. Then this oxygen that the plant cells keep for themselves, is it also for making energy breakdown of food?
Yes.
Yes. But the question is, we are jumping, hopping, running, talking. The plants, why should they need energy? Now that you talk about translocation and distribution of food, that also requires energy. Now that we talk about the transport of the water from the root to the upper parts of the plant, that also requires energy. So never mind, we understand that the plants do not show any locomotion, but the process of growth and division and the distribution and the transport of the water minerals, all these processes very much require energy. So a small fraction of oxygen the plants absorb for themselves also. The byproducts, is it clear? Oxygen and water. Water simply again diffuse into the atmosphere. So that part only to remember for water. I had talked about the raw materials, I had talked about the product. Something more now related to this. Something more now related to this. We are talking about photosynthesis. To talk about the concept of photosynthesis, here we try so far what we have studied as raw materials and the chlorophyll and the job of the chloroplast, etc. We try summarizing the concept in certain events of photosynthesis. Remember, you get this as a complete 3-mark question. What are the events of photosynthesis? What are the events? The first event is absorption. The first event is absorption of light. The first event, always remember. Now that I talk about absorption of light, which particular component is used? Chlorophyll. Absorption of light by chlorophyll. That is one particular step. Absorption of light by chlorophyll. What is the meaning of the event? What are some of the prominent reactions happening? Now, as per the syllabus, we are not talking about the reactions, but there's a whole lot of reactions to study when we talk about photosynthesis. So many reactions are there. We are talking about the first one, absorption of light by chlorophyll. Second, the transformation part. Now we are talking about conversion of light energy to chemical energy. Can you tell me what is the form of the chemical energy? Glucose. Glucose is a chemical component formed which on breaking down, just now I told you what is the role of oxygen there. Oxygen can break down glucose to provide energy. Are you understanding this point? The conversion of the light energy to chemical energy. You are asked questions for 1 mark. What is the transformation of energy during photosynthesis? What are you supposed to write? Conversion of light energy to chemical energy. The second part of this event is very, very important. Splitting of water molecule. Splitting of water molecule to form hydrogen. Nobody will close down the book unless and until, right, sitting under my nose and not able to answer a question, and you are the first one to shut down the book. Splitting of water molecule to form hydrogen ions and oxygen. It is actually hydrogen hydroxyl ions. So let us write straight away hydrogen. The steps break up, we don't need here. Take down the equation also. We are talking about breakdown of the hydrogen water molecule to hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen. What is this particular process known as? This is known as splitting of the water molecule. Actually, there are in between steps where first it is hydroxyl, then it comes to hydrogen. But this is okay for you. The water molecule breaking down to hydrogen and oxygen. And what is the last step? The last step is the reduction of carbon dioxide. Reduction of carbon dioxide to form carbohydrate. Which form of carbohydrate we are talking about? Glucose. Remember, your answer is not sucrose, it is glucose. That's the first product form. Then the transformation, that is different. So what are the 3 steps to summarize? Absorption of the light energy and its conversion. And then we talk about how the chemical energy would be formed. Splitting of the water molecule. What is this particular process known as? Take a note. This particular process is also known as photolysis or photolysis. What is photolysis? Breakdown of the water molecule to form hydrogen and oxygen. Based on this equation,
Yes, follow in the presence of
in
light.
the present, because the word photo is there. I'll just stop with this. From here, you get a question at times. What is the source of oxygen release during photosynthesis? What is your answer? What is the source of oxygen release? मतलब oxygen जो release हो रहा है during the process of photosynthesis, कौन से compound से release हो रहा है? Now the confusion is always, is it carbon dioxide or it is water?
Water.
Now you know it is water. Though carbon dioxide also has got oxygen in it, but carbon dioxide is not breaking up at all in the entire process of photosynthesis. It is the water only which is splitting up. It is the water only which is breaking down. We'll continue again from this topic the next class. Go through this part in the textbook also, so that if there is any doubt you can clarify.
Yes.
Exactly. बोला तुम दे दिया होगा मैंने.
ओए.
After rule लिया.
Microphone चालू.
Hey,